In the ancient lands between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, where human civilization first took root, there emerged stories of beings who came from the heavens. These were the Anunnaki, whose name in the Sumerian language means those who came from heaven to earth, or princely offspring. Their tale is woven through thousands of clay tablets, epic poems, and temple inscriptions that survived millennia beneath the sands of Mesopotamia. To understand the Anunnaki, we must journey back to the third millennium before the Common Era, to the world of ancient Sumer, where humanity first learned to write, to build cities, and to contemplate the relationship between mortals and the divine. The story of the Anunnaki is not a simple one. It evolves across cultures and centuries, from Sumerian city-states to the great Akkadian, Babylonian, and Assyrian empires that followed. The earliest mentions of the Anunnaki appear in Sumerian texts from around 2900 BCE. In these ancient records, they are described as the offspring of An, the sky god, whose name literally meant heaven or sky. An was considered the supreme deity of the Sumerian pantheon, the father of all gods, and his children, the Anunnaki, served as the divine council that governed cosmic affairs. In Sumerian cosmology, the universe was divided into distinct realms and ruled the heavens. Enlil governed the air and earth, and Enki held dominion over the fresh waters beneath the earth. The Anunnaki were considered the great gods who determined the fates of humanity and the natural world. They were contrasted with the Igigi, who in some traditions were described as lesser deities or servants who performed manual labor for the greater gods. The city of Nippur, located in what is now central Iraq, served as the religious center of Sumer. Here stood the Akur Temple, the most sacred shrine to Enlil, who was often described as the king of the Anunnaki. Pilgrims traveled from distant cities to pay homage, and the priests of Nippur carefully recorded the myths and genealogies of the divine realm on clay tablets using the wedge-shaped cuneiform script. According to Sumerian tradition, each major city had its patron deity from among the Anunnaki. Eridu, considered the oldest city in Sumerian belief, belonged to Enki, the god of wisdom, fresh water, and magic. Uruk was protected by Inanna, the goddess of love and war. Ur was home to Nanna, the moon god. These divine patrons were believed to dwell in ziggurats, massive stepped pyramids that connected heaven and earth. The Anunnaki functioned as a divine council or assembly, meeting to make decisions about the cosmos and humanity. This assembly, known as the Ubshukina, gathered to decree the fates, settle disputes among gods, and determine the course of earthly events. The number of Anunnaki varied in different texts. Some sources speak of 50 great gods, others mention 300 Anunnaki of heaven and 600 of the underworld, though these numbers may have been symbolic rather than literal. The hierarchy among the Anunnaki was complex and sometimes contradictory across different city-states and time periods. Generally, An held the highest position as the father god, though his active role in myths diminished over time. Enlil, lord of the air and earth, became the executive authority, the god who carried out the will of the divine council. Enki, lord of wisdom and the underground waters, served as the craftsman and problem solver of the gods. Below these supreme deities were numerous other Anunnaki with specific domains and responsibilities. Ninhursag, the mother goddess, presided over birth and fertility. Utu was the sun god and judge of justice. Nana governed the moon and the measurement of time. Inanna ruled over love, warfare, and political power. Each played their role in the cosmic order, and each had their own temples, priests, and festivals in the cities of Sumer. The relationships among the Anunnaki were depicted as remarkably human. They loved and quarreled, formed alliances and rivalries, experienced jealousy and compassion. They married, had children, and engaged in complex family dynamics that would influence their decisions in the divine council. These very human characteristics made them accessible to worshippers who saw their own lives reflected in divine dramas. One of the most significant myths involving the Anunnaki concerns the creation of humankind. This story, preserved in several versions across different periods, explains why humans exist and what their relationship to the gods should be. In the earliest versions, the Igigi gods, who were lesser deities or servants, grew weary of the hard labor required to maintain the cosmos. They had to dig irrigation canals, till the fields of the gods, and perform endless toil without rest. After 40 years of this burden, the Igigi rebelled, throwing down their tools and surrounding the house of Enlil, demanding relief from their endless work. Faced with this divine labor strike, the great Anunnaki convened to find a solution. Enki, the wise god, proposed a plan. He instructed the mother goddess Ninhursag, also called Ninma or Belet Ili depending on the text, to create a substitute worker who could bear the toil instead of the gods. Together, Enki and the mother goddess created humanity from clay mixed with the blood of a slain god, usually identified as We'ila or Geshtua, who had been a leader in the rebellion. This act of creation was both practical and profound. Humans were designed specifically to serve the gods by maintaining their temples, providing offerings, and performing the agricultural labor that sustained civilization. The purpose of humanity in this theological framework was to free the gods from toil, allowing them to engage in higher pursuits. Yet humans were also imbued with something divine. The blood and essence of a god mixed into their clay, which gave them consciousness, intelligence, and a spark of the divine nature. The creation account emphasizes the partnership between divine wisdom and divine nurturing. Enki provided the plan and the magic, while the mother goddess shaped the forms and breathed life into them. The first humans were molded like clay vessels on a potter's wheel, each one shaped by divine hands with care and intention. The fullest account of early human history, according to Mesopotamian tradition, is found in the Atrahasis epic, composed in Old Babylonian times around 1800 BCE, but based on earlier Sumerian sources. This epic provides a continuous narrative from creation through the Great Flood, with the Anunnaki playing central roles throughout. After humanity's creation, people multiplied rapidly across the earth. They built cities, developed agriculture, and grew numerous. But their very success created a new problem for the Anunnaki. The noise of human activity, their constant bustle, their celebrations, their very presence in such great numbers, disturbed the rest of the gods. Enlil, in particular, found himself unable to sleep because of the uproar from the earth below. Disturbed by this clamor, Enlil decided to reduce the human population. He sent various calamities upon the earth. First a plague to thin their numbers, then drought to make them suffer, then famine to starve them. Each time, however, Enki intervened to help humanity survive. He taught them rituals to appease the angry gods and showed them techniques to endure the hardships. Enlil grew increasingly frustrated with humanity's resilience and Enki's interference. Finally, he convinced the Divine Council to authorize the ultimate solution, a great flood that would wipe out all human life from the earth. The Anunnaki swore an oath not to warn humanity of the coming destruction, binding even Enki to silence. But Enki, the wise and compassionate god, found a way around his oath. He did not speak directly to humans, but instead spoke to the reed walls of a house where a particularly righteous man named Atrahasis slept. The walls overheard Enki's instructions to build a boat, to seal it with bitumen, to bring aboard his family and representatives of all living creatures, and to prepare for a deluge that would cover the earth. When the appointed time arrived, the Anunnaki released the floodwaters upon the earth. The storm god Adad thundered in the clouds. The warrior gods Shulat and Hanish went before, tearing up the mountains. Nergal, lord of the underworld, broke through the dams that held back the subterranean waters. Ninurta opened the irrigation canals. The fountains of the deep burst forth, and the windows of heaven opened, pouring rain upon the earth for 7 days and 7 nights. The deluge was so terrible that even the Anunnaki were frightened by what they had unleashed. They retreated to the highest heavens, cowering like dogs against the outer wall of heaven. The mother goddess Ninhursag wept for her human children who perished in the waters, lamenting that she had agreed to their destruction. The gods had not anticipated the emotional toll of witnessing such complete annihilation. When the flood finally subsided, Atrahosis's boat came to rest on a mountain. He opened a window and released birds to search for dry land. First a dove, then a swallow, then a raven flew forth. When the raven did not return, Atrahasis knew the waters had receded enough to disembark. He offered sacrifices to the gods, burning aromatic woods and pouring out libations. The Anunnaki, who had been deprived of human offerings during the flood, smelled the sweet savor of the sacrifice and gathered around like flies, desperately hungry for the worship they had destroyed. They realized their mistake. In eliminating humanity, they had eliminated the very beings who sustained them through ritual and reverence. Enlil arrived at the sacrifice in fury, angry that any humans had survived. But Enki defended his actions, arguing that complete destruction had been unjust and excessive. Rather than annihilating all humanity for the fault of the many, individual wrongdoers should face individual punishment. The Divine Council, having witnessed the consequences of their decision, agreed to a compromise. Following the flood, the relationship between the Anunnaki and humanity was renegotiated. Humans would be allowed to continue existing, but measures would be taken to control their population and noise. The Mother Goddess created natural limits on human life. Some women would be infertile. Some babies would not survive childbirth. And priestesses devoted to the temple would remain childless. Death itself became a normal part of the human experience, limiting individual lifespans. The Anunnaki also established kingship as a divine institution. Kings were chosen by the gods to rule on earth as their representatives, mediating between the divine and human realms. The concept of kingship descended from heaven became central to Mesopotamian political theology. Each king claimed legitimacy through divine selection, asserting that the Anunnaki, particularly Enlil or later Marduk, had chosen him to shepherd humanity. The city-states of Mesopotamia each maintained their patron deity from among the Anunnaki, and conflicts between cities were often framed as conflicts between their divine patrons. When Lagash fought against Umma, it was understood as Ningirsu, patron of Lagash, contending against Shara, patron of Umma. When a city was conquered, its gods were sometimes carried away as captives, demonstrating the victor's superiority. Temple complexes grew larger and more elaborate, serving as the focal points of urban life. These weren't merely places of worship, but economic centers where the wealth of the city was stored, redistributed, and managed. The priests who served the Anunnaki formed a powerful class, claiming to interpret divine will through omens, dreams, and ritual procedures. They recorded the wisdom of the gods in cuneiform on clay tablets, preserving astronomy, mathematics, medicine, and law. The Anunnaki were credited with giving humanity the fundamental elements of civilization. This concept was called Mi in Sumerian, divine decrees or principles that governed everything from kingship to craftsmanship, from music to warfare. The Mi were tangible objects that could be possessed, stolen, or transferred, representing aspects of civilized life. A famous myth tells how Inanna traveled to Eridu to visit her father Enki and obtained the Mi through trickery. Enki, having drunk too much beer at a feast celebrating his daughter's visit, offered her the precious Mi one by one. Inanna accepted them all, over 100 divine decrees, including lordship, priesthood, truth, wisdom, art, music, sexual intercourse, prostitution, law, and many others. When Enki sobered and realized what he had given away, he sent servants to retrieve them. But Inanna had already escaped to her city of Uruk, bringing civilization's blessings with her. This story illustrates how the Anunnaki were understood not as distant, abstract forces, but as active participants in human cultural development. They taught humanity how to live in cities, how to govern themselves, how to practice agriculture, and how to worship properly. Every skill and every social institution had divine origins, making the entirety of civilized life a gift from the gods. The Anunnaki also established justice as a divine principle. The famous law codes of Mesopotamia, including the Code of Hammurabi, were presented as revelations from the gods. Shamash, the sun god, who was one of the Anunnaki, was particularly associated with justice, as his light revealed all that was hidden, and his constancy symbolized the unchanging nature of divine law. Kings received their laws directly from the gods and enforced them as divine mandates. Evolution through cultures. 1150 Shatant 2 Winti. As political power shifted in Mesopotamia, so too did the prominence of different Anunnaki. When the Akkadian Empire rose under Sargon around 2334 BCE, Sumerian myths were translated into Akkadian and adapted to reflect new political realities. The Semitic-speaking Akkadians identified their own gods with the Sumerian Anunnaki, creating a syncretic system where deities had both Sumerian and Akkadian names. During the Old Babylonian period, Marduk, the patron god of Babylon, rose to supremacy among the Anunnaki. The Enuma Elish, The Babylonian creation epic recast cosmic history with Marduk as the hero who defeated the primordial chaos monster, Tiamat, and created the world from her body. In this version, Marduk received kingship over the gods by acclamation of the divine assembly, and the other Anunnaki became his subordinates, acknowledging his supremacy. The Assyrians later elevated their own patron, Asher, to similar supreme status, demonstrating how political power influenced theological hierarchies. Yet throughout these changes, the basic concept of the Anunnaki as the council of great gods who governed cosmic affairs remained consistent. They were the source of divine authority, the decreers of fate, and the ultimate powers behind earthly kingdoms. In the first millennium BCE, as Mesopotamian influence spread and blended with other cultures, the Anunnaki became associated with astrology and astronomical observation. The movements of planets and stars were believed to reflect the actions of the gods, and priests developed sophisticated systems for predicting earthly events based on celestial phenomena. Each of the major Anunnaki was identified with celestial bodies: Jupiter with Marduk, Venus with Ishtar, Saturn with Ninurta. The Anunnaki represent humanity's earliest attempts to understand the forces that shaped their world and their place within it. These ancient gods embodied the relationship between humans and the cosmos, between mortality and divinity, between civilization and chaos. Their myths, preserved in clay, survived millennia, allowing us to glimpse how our ancestors conceived of creation, justice, wisdom, and the purpose of human existence. In modern times, the Anunnaki have captured imaginations far beyond academic circles, inspiring numerous theories and interpretations. Though these often diverge significantly from the historical evidence found in ancient texts, the authentic ancient sources reveal a sophisticated theological system that evolved over thousands of years, reflecting the hopes, fears, and values of the world's first urban civilizations. As you drift into sleep, imagine those ancient cities between the rivers, the ziggurats rising toward heaven, the priests recording sacred stories on clay, and the eternal presence of the Anunnaki, watching over the human drama unfolding below, as they had since the beginning of time.